Okay, EJ, what are we eating here today?
We're eating real food.
I know. But what is this one called?
This is actually called the EJ Special.
Why is it the EJ Special?
Man, you know what? I looked at this meal and told myself I wanted to spruce it up with just some more content. When I say content, a lot more energy. So we've added beans to the mix. It already existed as a rice dish with veggies, with any choice of protein in the way of beef, chicken, or prawns. But I've added beans to the mix just for an extra kick. So legumes we know is another great source of protein. I've added sweet potatoes to the mix as well, so rich carb source. And today I'm consuming mine with shrimp. I think you have chicken in yours. And you know, the veggies are in there as well, so we're getting a nice kick.
So what do you think in terms of nutrition and supplementation, your belief on that in terms of when it comes to food?
Oh, pills, powders, and potions, you know, or whole food, you know, and I'm a big fan of Mother Nature, so I'm gonna go with Team Mother Nature over pills, powders, and potions, but I do believe that they have their place. They are called supplements for a reason, you know, they're supposed to supplement our whole food nutrition and not be the 90%, you know, it's supposed to be that 20%. So nutrition, whole foods, 80% use, and 20% can go to supplements.
So what do you think in terms of nutrition and performance and how the two are linked?
Oh, nutrition, you can say performance is fueled by nutrition. You know, definitely. We talk about what has to happen when we're on the playing field. We have to exert ourselves. What we're doing is we're expressing ourselves through our own efforts, energy. You know, what we need to do is make sure that we're consuming energy as well, because that's how performance is fueled. It's fueled through nutrition. It's fueled through the right mindset. You know, so a positive environment. So we want to consume positive foods and really little to no negative foods. I can say that. You know what I mean? Like there's certain vices that we all may have: the donuts and the lollipops and bags of chips and stuff. I'll call that the negatives when it comes to nutrition. Not negative calories, that's something different, but negatives in nutrition, where sometimes it just kind of satisfies a certain psychological element. Where we say, I want the bag of chips. But this is the stuff you got to stick close to. You know, it's very rich in its delivery. We're talking about nutrients. You know, we're talking about proteins, fats, carbohydrates. We're even talking fiber. You know, here we're talking hydration as another very key element. So it's always about looking at your plate and realizing what kind of abundance is on your plate, because what abundance is on your plate is at some point going to result in the performance that you're expecting, that you desire. So rich nutrition, rich performance. Poor nutrition, need I say more? Right?
How many meals like this would you eat in a day?
Myself, I'm 5'9", 210 pounds, so a little bit on the heavy side. I'm around 7-8% body fat right now. So for myself, I'd be consuming something of this portion size, about 4, sometimes 5 times a day, depending on if it's a high calorie day or low calorie day, depending on, you know, and that depends on if I have a very hard workout or kind of a moderate or low intensity workout. So 4 to 5 times one of these meals, and that's not including some small snacks. So I'm on top of my nutrition and I'm on top of my performance, as some may have seen in that 635-pound deadlift. Yeah.
All right, well, we're gonna let you. Just talk a little bit about your belief on mindful training. We've talked about that in the past. We're both passionate about it, and how there's linkage between our brains and how we eat, performance, all that. But just quickly, you know, we'll let you finish up. But what mindful training for you?
Mindful training. Anything else other than mentioning mindful training is kind of I'll say it's wrong. You know, to just think training and not think it is supposed to be mindful is a problem. You know, where we have, and I would say that's the difference between someone doing work, right, and someone getting work done. That person who's getting work done, I call that the mindful trainer. The person who's doing work, you know, they're just kind of drove, right? And there's when you say linkage, there's so much research out there. And then now I'll also speak on my creative experience, my experience with this, showing up and getting work done. The level of activation, the neural drive, the end result. You know, when you're meditating on the end result, when you're meditating on, you know, the work that needs to be done during, you know, so pre, intra, and post performance. When you meditate on these things, I found that I was in more control, you know, in many ways. And now we can even dive into some literature. There's a book that I recommended that you read by Stephen Kotler, Rise of Superman. And he talks about brainwave patterns, and they found that in the most successful athletes, and when I say successful athletes, I'll talk about successful performances, so in those states, that these individuals went through an alpha brainwave state and a theta/gamma brainwave state. And what that did was that actually, it elicited a response that was far better than the fight or flight response that we mostly see in individuals, where there's this dump of adrenaline and there's a dump of stress hormones, right, in the body. That's what happens under the fight or flight scenario. But when you go the route of alpha brainwaves and into theta, you have this increase of nitric oxide in the body, which is what we want. But then you also, when you get into that theta gamma brainwave pattern, now what you're doing is you're getting this dump of dopamine, and dopamine is actually something that helps basically consolidate movement patterns. So you get into what we call this flow state. And flow state is actually where you can control your heart rate, and you're not even really concerned about time. You're more set up in a situation where it's like your natural instincts are taking over. Now, natural instincts take over. What did you make that as a natural instinct, right? Were you shooting the puck properly? Were you making decisions properly? These things in a flow state become very easy. So it's all about challenging ourselves to get into a flow state and not be in a situation where we're panicking, right? I feel like that keeps us way too grounded, if I could say, and I'm going to use grounded in a sense where it's better to fly, it's better to float than to be on the ground. You know what I mean? Because it's almost effortless, but you have to work to fly, right? You have to create that mental note. You know, we always see that in movies, like Superman didn't just, you know, you could see him kind of get into that zone and then he took off, right? It wasn't, oh, it's just happening, you know? You have to will it to happen. So mindfulness is exactly it. You have to will performance. You have to desire it. It has to be in the mind. You know, the brain has to imagine before the body can move. And if you're not imagining with the brain, then you're not moving the way you really want to, right? You have to conceptualize. You have to understand what you need to do, right? So mindfulness, you can't say training without the word mindfulness as a prefix, you know, because it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense to you, but I hope it doesn't.
No cars coming. I'm standing there and a bunch of people are chatting, and I'm like, do it, no, don't do it, and I just took off like I flew out of the starting blocks, and I heard the people next to me yell like, whoa, they're like, whoa, it's because the way I reacted. Back in 2010, the first place I remember I had 3 pairs of shoes. Yeah, so I would. How you doing, John? Hey. I'm well. I was like, who's she talking about? You talking about her? Because she's trouble. She's trouble, I know that. I'm joking, I don't. How you doing?
Come to the gym or
Yeah, so EJ, when you come to the gym and you're working with an athlete, what is the order of operation in terms of what you're going to go through to make sure that they're prepared and ready to start mindful training?
First and foremost, what needs to be done, first, last, and always, but first, is there needs to be some type of assessment. And the assessment needs to come by way of, I'll call him the architect, in this case the coach. So really understanding human movement, understanding that the athlete must have toes that they can move, must have an ankle that they can rotate, must have a knee that they can hinge upon, must have a hip, as a gyroscope. That's something that is, the hip has, it's like such an important center for the body. The shoulders very much so act like the hips. Does this individual have a spine? Can they articulate? Can they segment? Can they rotate through that spine? As it's necessary when performing certain movement patterns in a transverse plane, such as shooting a puck. You want to find out, does the athlete have the capacity to lift the arms over the head, put them back down? Shoulder flexion, extension. There's so many things that we need to have as weapons, if I could say that, movement. So the assessment needs to come by way of the coach, that educated individual who can take the athletes through some basic movement and and basically find out if the athlete can actually move. Do they have the prerequisites to be out there and be the best hockey player that they can be?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because there's being the best hockey player is obviously physical, you know, and it's obviously mental. But movement patterns are all mental, and then by way of the mental, they become physical, right? So we talk about neuroplasticity, like the patterns have to be set, right? And the muscles will adapt to the pattern that you're accepting or that you're practicing. So,
all right, well, let's show us a couple things.
Yeah, most definitely. So what I like to do is I start off with a warm-up, and this warm-up is basically like a flow. So I like to take it nice and slow, so it's very self-limiting, so you can find out if there are any bumps and bruises or if there are any weak points or any pinch pain, because once you identify what's going on, the next step is to communicate with the coach. Coach, I'm trying to actually perform let's say a hip hinge or a squat, and my ankle's bugging me. So then the coach can find out, okay, do we have some closed angle pain or open angle pain? Can I actually regress the exercise, or do I need to actually send you straight to a physiotherapist, right? So the controlled articular rotations or flow, best way to start the workout. So I'll demonstrate something.
Okay, awesome.
Right? So this one here, this one's kind of, I'm going to call it the advanced position. Sorry that I'm showing you guys an advanced position first. What I'm doing is attempting or landing myself into a deep squat position or a deep knee bend. If you watch any young athlete, any young mover, you'll notice that the hip sits below the knee, okay? And you can actually keep the torso upright while your feet are flat on the ground. So this is a nice healthy position. I'm not straining my back, I'm not straining my knees. Okay, this is a nice poop position as well, as it can avoid constipation. I traveled to Turkey a while back, and I went to the toilet at the airport. I walked in there and I was like, whoa, I'm in the bathroom for like, I don't know, like maybe infants or something, because there's just a hole on the floor with shoe marks on the sides. But I realized like that there was more gentlemen in there, and that's where everyone was going to the bathroom in this position. So I did my research, finding out that this is the best position to actually support bowel movement. We also know this as a power breathing position. We see babies lay on their back and hold their feet and breathe from this position here. This is very restorative exercise. So what I do with this one is actually start to affect my ankles. So notice what I'm doing is I'm actually acting like it's basically a deep squat while being blown by the wind. Okay, so what I'm doing is actually using my own musculature, okay, basically around the ankles to create this circular movement. And what I'm doing is I'm actually getting to an aggressive shin angle, right? So we all know that the ankles play a very integral part in finishing a skate pattern, finishing any kind of acceleration pattern, changing levels, right? So this is one exercise that I really like to do to warm up the ankles, all right? Another exercise that I like to get into, this one, another advanced one, but mind you, I'm able to perform these advanced movements because I practice them. This one is basically a lateral squat that turns into a Cossack squat. So I start off in this lateral squat position, then I roll onto the heel, and I'm affecting the tissue on the inside of the thigh, as that's another area that can be heavily insulted through skating patterns. So what I'm doing here is just rotating. What I'll do to get to the other side, nice, controlled, I'll slide over while trying to be as low as possible. Doing the same thing, lateral squat, roll onto the heel, I'll slide back over. For those, a regression for this movement, if you can't get into that deep position, is I'll actually do it from the knee. So I'll swivel the hip. Okay? Sometimes I like to mix them all in. I'll start off by swiveling through the hip, then I'll rock back into this position here. I'll move forward, swivel the hip, rock back into that lateral squat, that deep lateral squat.
Awesome.
So some other things I'd like to get into is I've seen a fair amount of issues with the shoulder girdle with hockey players, as they favor one side, basically the stick handling. So one thing I like to do is I like to build awareness of the weak side, so an exercise that I like to do is draw attention to the shoulder blade. So I see a lot of elevation and rotation in a lot of players. So what I like to do to build awareness is I like to get them to learn how to move the shoulder blade, right? Get them conscious of it, because we tend to see a lot of, I don't want to call it tension, but favoritism towards being in this position. So what I like to do is we do some what I call shoulder blade protraction, and pulling the arm forward, okay? And then what I get the athlete to do is consciously, slowly start to retract, pulling the shoulder blade back, not swinging the arm out, okay? Nor cheating by elevating, just keeping it in this plane here and drawing it back. Okay, so this would be the advanced, the beginner version actually, starting with the beginner version. Okay, the advanced version would be building some awareness through a rotational motion. So now you get into elevation, protraction, depression. So down, back, up, forward. If you get the athlete to do that, we can do it with 2 arms. Okay, we can change the angle as well. So not just favoring keeping it out in this position horizontal. We can do it from the bottom. Same thing. I even like to get into doing it with load. So actually go into a dip. This would be advanced times 2. Okay. So with this one here, notice what I'm doing, controlling the shoulder blade. Now I'm having to deal with gravity. So this is basically, it looks very much so like a dip, but what's happening is here is I'm focusing on controlling the shoulder blade. So all that musculature that plays a part in manipulating its position, that's what I'm drawing attention to, you know? So the grip is obviously essential here. We could do the same thing hanging from the bars. So there's many different ways to do this. So this is some of the ways I like to get warmed up. And I'll show you what I do when I'm warmed up.
What's going on?
How are you?
Good, good. This is the man right here. YEG, this is a Parris movement. You can watch this guy.
Thank you very much.
He's the man.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So is he. He's the man as well. All right, so an exercise that I've actually trained, you know, some people will kind of look at me and go like, that's impossible. You're just a freak. No, no. I'm 31 years old. Maybe I'm a 31-year-old freak, but the thing is this, there has been, I've laid down a lot of mortar, right? So I actually started off by building my castle in the sky, right? So if you get that, my castle in the sky, it's like, it was my dream, right? So I had to build the dream. It's this nice elaborate castle in the sky. What I've been doing, the actual work, the second layer of mindfulness that I've applied to it was actually building the foundation. So what I did was I built a foundation that actually connected to that castle that was once floating. Now I can live in it, right? So with that being said, some of the work that I've done, okay, this was the dream, to be able to do a 1-arm pull-up. Yeah, I just gave you guys a hint what I'm gonna do. So the 1-arm pull-up, I've done the work. So I basically achieved all the prerequisites to be able to do what I'm about to demonstrate. So what I'm doing here is applying myself, turning into the bar, all right? I don't just think of this is my arm. As soon as I grab this instrument, it becomes a part of me, right? So firm grip on. What I'm gonna do next is use my whole arm line to pull myself up. Control my descent. Pull up. Control my descent. Okay? So that's 1-arm pull-up, nice and focused. I've learned how to do that the right way, so built all the prerequisites to be able to do that, learning how to create tension. The order, teach myself how to disassociate. I have a shoulder blade. I have a glenohumeral rotation, so rotation in the shoulder capsule itself, right? What I've done is I started doing a lot of isometric work on holding the position, so handling, you know, let's say my body weight. Even before that, I would actually have my toes on a box, just basically barely balancing on the box, loading a lot on the arm. And I started doing even some double arm weighted lifts. So I think you might see me on YouTube doing 385 pounds for 3 reps on weighted pull-ups. So you know, at that point I knew I could get it in. Other ones that I've worked on, this one's very much so a pillar strength exercise. So teaching how to it's basically like a very exaggerated form of a plank, because now you're floating. So I grab hold of my castle. What I do from here, so I pull up, back down. So with that exercise, the lats are heavily involved. The pattern here is actually somewhat similar to the pattern of a deadlift. If you're talking about setting the arm position, because in a deadlift, you're securing the bar against the body using your lats, right? So with this exercise, I have to pull with the lats. And then I have to squeeze, I have to basically brace the musculature of my trunk in order to hold that airborne plank position. So it teaches you, it's got a lot of elements in there, you know, that translate.
So, EJ, now that you've showed some of the, what's your excitement level about working with some athletes from Lloydminster and then also our athletes here in Edmonton, and just being excited about teaming up again and being a part of Project Pro? What do you think about all
Oh,
this?
man, I'm excited. Really excited, you know. You can obviously tell, like, I'm excited and smile a lot. You know, I got involved in coaching because I wanted to share with the next generation. You know, and I love this. This is like, I'm very passionate about this. And I'm also very passionate about our relationship, our connection. We've worked together in the past. And, you know, every day we're growing. And it's exciting for me to actually demonstrate a lot of what I've learned, a lot of what I've gone through. And it's another platform for me to learn, because I'll be working with athletes, and that's how I grow. That's how I get better, through the creative experience, through the connection. You know, there's so much that goes on between the coach and athlete, right? And it's the teacher-student, but I also reciprocate that ratio, that equation as well, if I could say that formula, because I'm learning from them as well. So at some point, those athletes I'm working with, and even work with yourself, where you're going to be the teacher and I'm going to be the student, but we also flip that around. So it's going to be very fruitful in the end. You know, and I'm going to enjoy the process, and I hope you guys get excited, because I'm excited. When I'm excited, people get excited.
That's awesome, man.
Awesome.
All right.
Let's do this.
Okay.